very warm welcome to all the fellow participants and distinguished speakers to the 21st edition of World Sustainable Development Summit. I am Riya Malhotra, and we have gathered here today for the session, Planetary Health, Humanitarian and Equity Implications of Sustainable Development Policies. This session will be moderated by Ms. Priya Shankar, India Director, Environment and Climate Program, Bloomberg Philanthropies. We shall have a special science leadership address by Professor Tony Capon, Monash Sustainable Development Institute, Melbourne. On the leadership panel, we are very happy to have very distinguished line of speakers with us. To start with, we have Dr. Eric Solheim, President, Green Belt and Road Institute. We have Mr. Vidar Helgeson, Executive Director, the Nobel Foundation. We have Mr. Manish Papna, President and CEO, Natural Resources Defense Council. We have Mr. Ranjit Bharthakur, Founder and President, Balipara Foundation. We have Dr. Zhou Jinfang, Secretary General, China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation. I would now hand over the session to Ms. Priya Shankar to contribute to the proceedings of the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ria, and welcome everyone to this session on planetary health, humanitarian and equity implications of sustainable development policies. As Ria mentioned, we have a really stellar panel here today with experience across sort of government, academia, civil society, bringing perspectives from a variety of regions. I think just to kind of unpack at the start a little bit what we'll be talking about before I invite some of the speakers to join us. I think we all are sort of experiencing an unprecedented and unimaginable sort of last couple of years with the COVID pandemic. And now that we're sort of starting to recover out of that, it has really brought home a few factors. I think one is how interconnected the planet is, and how what happens in one part of the world can be sort of deeply linked with other parts of the world, and no part can really be isolated from the challenges that face us that can spread. The second is how fragile our systems are in terms of coping with some of these shocks. The third is also around the sort of inequity that has emerged, which we can see in areas which have had sort of access to the vaccine and not. But on a hopeful note, the fourth is also how we can sort of resolve these issues, I think, where we are starting to see some progress compared to when the pandemic first hit and we didn't know what would be the way out of it. We are beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. So if we sort of work together and are able to bring a strong collaborative spirit to the challenges we face, we are also able to sort of navigate through them. And I think this is particularly relevant to this topic of planetary health, because we know that 60% of known infectious diseases are zoonotic and 75% of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic. And biodiversity loss is also associated with the emergence of new zoonotic diseases, and climate change is only likely to exacerbate this. Another area where we see the sort of strong linkages between climate change and health playing out is also through air pollution, where air pollution is really one of the leading causes for the global burden of disease and impacts on human health. And many of the causes that lead to climate change are similar to the causes and sources that lead to air pollution. So I think there's great linkages between climate and health, and also not just climate, but sort of biodiversity and sustainable development and equity. And we really need to start sort of seeing the interplay between these issues and how they integrate with each other, and how we can sort of tackle some of the challenges we face in a much more systematic and integrated way. And with that, I'd now like to invite Professor Tony Capon from the Monash Development Institute in Melbourne to speak to us. Professor Capon, I'm not sure we can hear you.
Terrific to be with you all, and apologies for that slight delay there. I'm going to give just in 8 or 9 minutes a brief overview of this concept of planetary health. And so I just really want to do 3 things. I want to pick out some highlights from the Rockefeller Foundation Lancet Commission on Planetary Health, and then reflect on the importance of thinking ecologically about human health, particularly in the context of the pandemic, of course. And then, so what? Why is this important? In 2014, Richard Horton, the editor-in-chief of the Lancet Medical Journal, established a commission on planetary health with support from the Rockefeller Foundation. And a year later, we published the report of that commission, Safeguarding Human Health in the Anthropocene Epoch. Here's a list of commissioners. I was one of the commissioners. At that time, I was directing the Global Health Institute for United Nations University. The commissioners came from a range of disciplinary backgrounds and from various regions of the world. So we weren't all medical doctors. And importantly, the bottom line there of this slide, the work we did very much built on other work, including, of course, the Brundtland Commission back in the 1980s, the report Our Common Future, the report of the World Commission on Environment and Development, of course, chaired by Dr. Gro Brundtland, who was trained as a medical doctor in Norway before she went on to be Prime Minister of that country, to chair that commission, and later led the World Health Organization. So the concept of sustainable development really has at its heart concerns about the health and well-being of people, current generations and future generations. But we can go further back in the medical profession. Hippocrates, for example, in ancient Greece more than 2,000 years ago, was writing books like this on airs, waters, and places. He was talking to his patients. He was thinking ecologically about how they lived and where they lived and what that meant for their health and well-being. So this kind of thinking has been with us for millennia, but we've left it behind in the way we've modernized medicine in many ways. And of course, we can go even further back to Indigenous perspectives on health and well-being. Waiora is a Maori word for well-being and healthy waters, and it was the theme for the International Health Promotion Conference convened in New Zealand in 2019, the most recent one of the series, focused on promoting planetary health and sustainable development for all. Because while planetary health is a new term in public policy and research, it's not a new idea for Indigenous people. These connections between the health of people, the health of natural systems, foundational understandings for Indigenous people. So what did we find in the commission? Firstly, by almost any measure, the human population is healthier now than ever before. So here we've got life expectancy data from the World Bank, 1960 on the left through to 2010, and this black line in the middle of the chart showing that world average life expectancy rose from the low 50s in 1960 through to the high 60s in 2010, and it's now more than 70. And you can see that this was true for all regions of the world. We've seen rises in life expectancy, but as Priya said, significant inequities in health outcomes, particularly in Africa and South Central and West Asia. But in achieving those health gains, we've exploited the planet at an unprecedented rate, escalating carbon dioxide emissions, ocean acidification, escalating energy use, global deforestation, water use, fertilizer use. The list could go on. So what is planetary health? Put simply, planetary health is the health of human civilization and the state of the natural systems on which it depends. And here a schema from the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, now 17 years ago. The links between environmental change and health. On the left, escalating human pressures on the global environment. In the middle, a list of environmental changes and ecosystem impairments, climate change, ozone depletion, forest clearance, wetland loss, biodiversity loss, freshwater depletion, urbanization, damage to coral reefs and ecosystems. And on the right, three categories of health effects. The direct health effects of extreme weather events, for example, ecosystem-mediated health effects, where we see this spillover of these novel pathogens, like the coronavirus, for example, and then the indirect, deferred and displaced health effects, where we see loss of livelihoods in the context of climate change, for example, displacement of people, delta cities, for example, in South Asia, many people at risk, conflict as well. So a range of health effects from these environmental changes. Just having trouble moving to the next slide. As Priya said, air pollution, a critical issue. Estimates of air pollution deaths here from the World Health Organization. Every year, more than 3 million deaths from ambient pollution in cities, and more than 4 million deaths from the household burning of fossil fuels, of solid fuels, for heating and cooking, for example. So a total around the world, more than 7 million premature deaths every year from air pollution. And then these emerging diseases like the current pandemic. We've seen accelerating spillover in recent decades in the context of these environmental and social changes, whether it was H5N1 and SARS here in the Asian region, Ebola in West Africa, Zika in the Americas, or of course, the COVID-19 pandemic now. This emergence, this spillover of novel pathogens from wild animals through domestic animals to people happens in the context of environmental and social change, whether that's forest clearance, urbanization, climate change itself, new opportunities for contact between animals and people. Importantly, our commission report spent about half of the report is about what we can do about these things. We weren't just describing the problems. We talked about meeting the challenges. There's much we already know. We need to get on with it. And at the heart of much of the problem is our current dominant economic model. Our high consumption, wasteful model needs to transition rapidly to a circular model of the economy, where we focus on reuse, repair, recycling. Perhaps we don't even talk about waste anymore because we understand that all of these materials, they're resources, and the byproduct of one process is potentially an input for another process. So we need to get this circularity into our economic thinking. Here's a link to the Lancet Commission report, well worth a look. There's the long 50-page report, but there's shorter pieces of writing, video material, and other infographics. Now, at the same time as we were doing that Lancet Commission report, we were variously working with colleagues around the world, of course, on shaping the Sustainable Development Goals. Here, the list of 17. Now, the World Health Organization uses this infographic with SDG 3, the health SDG, at the center, showing that the other 16 SDGs are all potentially determinants of health, foundations of health. UNDP has framed planetary health in this issue brief 4 years ago now, and made clear that this new field, this new approach can be useful in the implementation of the SDGs, avoiding us going down silos of implementation and thinking more integratively. Now, I want to make some general remarks too about the importance of human ecological thinking as a way of understanding patterns of human health alongside epidemiological thinking in our research, education, policy, and practice. And I refer, for example, to the work of the eminent human ecologist Stephen Boyden, one of his books here on the right, The Biology of Civilization, Understanding Human Culture as a Force in Nature. When, from a human ecological point of view, we think about human activities, the things that people are doing every day on Earth. Now, there's a range of implications from the things that we do for our health, positive and negative, potentially. In public health, we talk about behavioural risk factors, for example, lack of physical activity, an unhealthy diet, for example. We also talk about the social determinants of health, the foundations of health, the safety nets we provide in society, for example. Notably, health people don't always think about the environmental impacts of the things people are doing on Earth and what that means for the health of the planet, and the flow-on impacts from changes to the health of the planet, climate change, for example, biodiversity loss, what that means for health in the future, including spillover of novel pathogens. These are now called ecological determinants of health. It's a new term introduced from Canada and being taken up around the world. The final slide in this sequence has the arrows going in the opposite direction to remind us of the importance of systems thinking and the fact that when we make a change in one part of the system, there's potentially unintended consequences in other parts of the system. So this is called the Boyden biosensitivity triangle from that human ecologist, Stephen Boyden. And today we're particularly interested in what sustainable development policies might mean here in terms of shaping human activities and potentially safeguarding health of people and planet. Here's a link at the top of this slide to where you can download a free book on this topic. So 2 final slides. Here an infographic explaining what we mean by the term planetary health. We understand it as a cultural transformation. Planetary health is about safeguarding the health and well-being of current and future generations through good stewardship of Earth's natural systems and by rethinking the way we feed, move, house, power, and care for the world. So here on the top right, you can see Boyden's biosensitivity triangle, the things we do, what that means for the health of people and the health of the planet. Importantly, in the middle of this slide, how we manage ourselves to leave no one behind. In the language of the UN, equity considerations, our culture, mindset, values, education, regulation, economic systems. And 5 examples of big pathways where we need to rethink how we feed the world, how we move the world, how we house the world, how we power the world, and how we care for the world. We need to do these things being mindful of the health of both people and planet, keeping the planet in mind. And the bottom line in this infographic, our future depends on the health of our natural world. So final slide, so what? Why is this important? Firstly, we need an eco-social approach alongside biomedical approaches like vaccines, very important as they are. We need to recognize ecological, economic and social determinants of health. Second, systems thinking. Acknowledging the interdependence of all species on Earth, the interdependence of people, absolutely, but the interdependence of all species, plants, animals, including healthy microorganisms, which we need every day, of course. Thirdly, intergenerational health equity. We pay attention to health inequities in society, but we don't always think about legacy and what the way we're doing things might mean for the health and well-being of future generations. That's at the heart of sustainable development. We need to bring it into everyday thinking. Fourthly, Indigenous and local knowledge, a transdisciplinary approach, transcending academic disciplines and valuing know-how from people in policy and practice, local know-how, Indigenous ways of knowing. So fifthly, a summative point, finally, we need to bring planetary consciousness into everyday life and our socio-economic and commercial systems. We need to be conscious of the planet in everything we do every day. Thank you very much. Back to you, Priya. I'm just going to try and stop sharing. I found this difficult last time, but I think I can do it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Capon, for that really powerful illustration of the inextricable connection between human health and the environment and planetary health, and how linked we are to this sort of systems and a wider ecosystem around us. I'd like to now invite Mr. Solheim, President of the Green Belt and Road Institute, to share his perspectives.
Good afternoon, Delhi. Namaste. Last year, the entire focus of the global climate debate tended to be on Glasgow. And there were some progress in Glasgow on methane, on deforestation, and a number of other areas. But because it was the wrong focus, because it's not the diplomatic effort which is driving the green agenda of the world these days, it's the political economy. Decisions made by Prime Minister Modi, President Biden, and President Xi, and many other leaders, and it's what's happening in business. And I believe the green agenda of the world is now mainly driven by 3 Bs. It's business, it's Brussels, and it's Beijing. Let me start with business. I mean, look to Microsoft. What they are doing, promising to be carbon neutral by 2030, even compensating for all emissions in the history of the company, becoming a non-plastic company, and involving with Alaska Airlines into reducing emissions from the air industry. No nation has done anything of similar magnitude like Microsoft. Move to Europe, IKEA is far ahead of any government when it comes to a circular economy. Very soon, when you buy some furniture from IKEA, you'll be able to hand it in. They will find a new user, or they will recycle it into a new IKEA product. Or for the biodiversity, April, the world's biggest paper and pulp company, Indonesian company, their conservation of the rainforest in Sumatra is among the best in the world. Why? Not because they have better intentions than government, but they have the resources. They have the fire brigades and the helicopters to make sure that no one is encroaching upon the rainforest protected by April. So business is driving the world, and overall business is now far ahead of government in most nations. Australia, which we just heard from, is a case in point. The government may not be the most forward-leaning on green development, when some of the business leaders are the absolute forefront of the green development of the world. Fortescue as an example. Moving on to Brussels, the European taxonomy is now driving all environment efforts in Europe. My nation, Norway, is not even a member of the European Union. Still, Brussels is much more important to us than Oslo for the environment direction. And when it will become much cheaper for finance to finance the green, much more expensive and difficult to finance the brown, because we see a huge green shift in European industry for climate and for protection of nature. And Beijing, of course, last year President Xi promised that China would stop all overseas coal investment. Much more important than any outcome of Glasgow, because it will put the entire machinery of Chinese business behind green hydrogen, solar, wind, electric mobility, all the areas where China is now the #1 nation. There's not one single environment-friendly technology where China is not far ahead of any other nation, not necessarily in the kind of peak of technology, but when it comes to the scale, China is producing 80% of all solar panels in the world. Last year, President Xi, by the way, also promised that China will plant an area the size of the Kingdom of Belgium every year from now to 2030. Well, that's a massive greening effort of the planet. So I believe that with these efforts from business, from Brussels, and from Beijing, and from many others, we have shifted during the COVID into being on the right path. The train has started, it's moving in the right direction, but we need to speed up, and there is a need for more urgency. So what can go wrong? I believe there are two global issues which can go wrong. One is geopolitics. When Dr. Pachauri came to Oslo for the Nobel Peace Prize, he quoted these beautiful words from the Veda. I mean, we will celebrate the work of Dr. Pachauri later today. But these beautiful words of the Veda, the whole world is one family. That's the spirit we need to be on. If the United States and China in particular cannot work together, but if by extension India, Europe, we can all not work together, we will fail. Together as one family, only the sky is the limit. Divided and in conflict, there are huge difficulties. And the other difficulty is that the transition needs to be fair. Need to be fair because we all want fairness. I think that's in the DNA of most of us. We believe a fairer world is a better world. But the transition also needs to be fair to be effective. Because if it's not fair, you will mobilize so much opposition to the transition that it simply cannot work. And there are two ways it needs to be fair. It needs to be fair between nations, and it needs to be fair inside nations. Between nations, I mean, look to the craziness of Glasgow, where some people are finger pointing to India, saying you Indians are not on the right path. Well, US emissions per capita up to today is 25 times Indian emissions per capita up to today. So how can anyone finger pointing to India? In reality, India is the fourth B. Bharat, Indian for India. Bharat is now on the right path, and Prime Minister Modi has completely changed the debate in India from the old, do we want to develop or do we want to take care of Mother Earth, into how can Bharat or India move ahead with the win-win solutions, all those who create jobs, while at the same time they're good for the environment. He has launched a green hydrogen mission for India with Mr. Ambani, Mr. Adani, two of the richest Indians, which will put massive amounts of money on this. It's launched India as a solar nation. Very soon, I bet India will be the second biggest solar nation in the world behind China. And you see India massively moving ahead on solar. But all over India, the state of Telangana has increased its tree cover by 3%. There are fantastic urban parks in the great tree city of Hyderabad. In Andhra Pradesh, they're taking global lead on zero budget farming. State of Maharashtra is taking the lead on making all the buses in the mega city of Mumbai electric very soon, and launching an electric mobility plan for Maharashtra. Well, Maharashtra is 1.5 times the size of Germany. It would be the second biggest nation in Europe if it was a separate state. So this is of enormous global importance. But the most important here is a new development model is possible. Prime Minister Modi is very much on that path, the win-win model, where you have enormous economic gains in jobs, while at the same time, of course, taking much better care of nature. That's for the first time possible in the 21st century. When the old model was, first you prioritize economic growth, you pollute, as hell, and then you become rich, you start cleaning up. The new model, the model of the 21st century, is the win-win model, and India is spearheading that model with China, Europe, and others. So global equity or fairness is needed, and that is happening now because the new model makes it possible for developing nations to benefit from the green shift, both economically and when it comes to the ecology. The second very much needed fairness is inside nations. There are enormous gains for every nation going green. The United States of America will benefit tremendously from going green. But that may be more easy to understand and see if you're living in California or Arizona than if you are a coal worker in West Virginia or Kentucky. It's exactly the same in China. It's much more easy to see the gain in Guangdong province, which has now 2 million base stations for 2G, far ahead of anything else in the world, than it is in the historically coal province of Shanxi. Or in India, Well, if you are in Tamil Nadu, the benefit may be easier to observe than if you are in the cold state or Jharkhand, as an example. So we need to make this transition fair, which means regional programs for those areas which maybe maybe in some difficulties. European Union has launched big funds for this to happen in Europe, different schemes to make sure that those areas who do not easily observe the benefits of the green shift, that they also can tap into those benefits. And you need on the individual level to help people with retraining into new businesses. The Chinese company Didi, which is the Uber of China, they have launched a retraining scheme for former coal workers. They can get a permanent job with Didi, or they can get an intermediate job with Didi until they get a more permanent occupation somewhere else. So to just sum up, I'm very optimistic. I believe the 21st century is the century where we will make an ecological civilization, but we need to create fairness between nations and fairness within nations. Otherwise, we will have difficulty making the leap we need to do. And no word can guide us better than what Dr. Pachauri quoted from the Vedas: the whole world is one family. How beautiful.
Thank you, Dr. Solheim, for outlining so well the progress that is being made, but also the importance of a fair and just transition and the importance of cooperation and unity across the world. I would like to now invite Mr. Vidar Helgesen, Executive Director of the Nobel Foundation, to share his thoughts with us.
Thank you, TERI, for inviting me once again to this leading global summit on issues that are really critical for planet and people. And thank you for putting on the agenda the issue of planetary health. I think Professor Capon's introduction made it quite clear to us how complex this is. He did refer to the former Prime Minister of my home country, Dr. Brundtland, and her commission. She's actually famous in my country for a statement saying that everything depends on everything else, which might sound ridiculous, but it's really a deep truth in that. And of course, that puts us with a big challenge when it comes to dealing with planetary health. One of the questions we have been asked in this context is how do we achieve a systems-based approach? And Professor Capon indeed spoke a lot about the need for a systems approach. This is as difficult as it is critical, I think. We tend to live in silos. Politics tend to be siloed. Public administration tend to be siloed. Businesses often operate in silos, and even science, even the scientists that tell us that we need to think across sectors are quite often in silos. But there are ways in which we can overcome those silo challenges, and I'm going to point to two major and important strategies that I do think we need to see more of. One is systematic planning. Planning is a dull word, but it really is necessary if we are to manage across these different silos. In my home country, our economy builds a lot on the ocean, different aspects of the ocean economy. And the efforts made over 2 decades in integrated ocean management or marine spatial planning, starting with scientific assessments of the ecosystems, on the human impacts on the ecosystems, on the industrial impacts on the ecosystems, with that scientific basis involving all industrial actors, ministries, civil society in broad-based planning process, is an example that is now taking place in more and more countries. But after 20 years in Norway, this is still work in progress. It's really, really demanding, but I think it is the only way of going about this. And luckily, the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, comprising 14 important ocean states and more joining now have committed to sustainable ocean planning. And this we need to do not only in the blue domain, but also in the green domain and where the green meets the blue. The other thing on systems approaches, which I think is really critical, is to put in place the policies that we do know work across sectors. A carbon tax is the prime example of this, where anyone doing carbon emissions will be impacted regardless of sectors if you apply it universally. That is a means to achieving systems changes that is, from a political perspective, one of the easier, no-brainer ways of doing it. The polluter pays principle, of which the carbon tax is one example, should be applied much more systematically. And I think we need, in the phase of the nature crisis, we need to go beyond this. We need really to put in place proper natural capital accounting, so that whatever we take out of nature is compensated by reinvesting in nature. So systems approach is very difficult, but possible. The second thing I would like to highlight is the need for public decision making to be informed by science. And I believe in the global situation we're in, we need new ways of science policy interactions in order to understand and manage the multiple global crises that we have, and to prevent those crises from worsening, and hopefully to turn the crisis into opportunities. There are so rapid changes now happening to ecosystems in oceans and on land that we need science much more continuously to inform policy about what happens. Because of those changes being so rapid, we also need accelerated solutions. So we need science to inform policymakers what are the best solutions available. And because we need this process to move faster, we need governments and businesses to make decisions faster. There's also a risk of unintended consequences, a risk of side effects that we didn't envision. And that too requires a continuous interaction between research and policy making, decision making, to be able to correct course in time. I believe many public decision making processes today in all countries are too slow, because we have a sort of serial process starting with research, then public commissions, then parliamentary and government dealing with the issues. And often those processes are too long-winded to actually address the speed with which we need solutions today. Not to speak of the fact that in many countries and in many situations, policies aren't even evidence-based in the first place, and in some countries, things are deteriorating in that respect. So I think we really need science to get its hands more dirty in engaging with politics, and we need policymakers in politics and businesses to engage much more systematically with those producing knowledge about where the world is heading, where our ecosystems are heading, and what we can do to address the momentous systemic challenges that we have before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Helgeson, and thank you for outlining the importance of systems thinking and planning, and especially this is sort of music to my ears at Bloomberg Philanthropies, because it's an approach we really follow, is sort of the importance of evidence and data underpinning decision making. And I think that is increasingly critical as we try and address for these integrated challenges to ensure that there's strong evidence and data guiding our decision making. I'd now like to invite Manish Bapna, President and CEO of the Natural Resources Defense Council. Manish, could you share your insights, please?
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Priya, for moderating this event, as well as for TERI, for the long-standing partnership TERI and NRDC has had close to 15 years working for a better planet. It is nice to follow two Norwegians because I suspect the rest of them are in Beijing winning Olympic medals. So this at least makes it a little bit fairer for the rest of us trying to do a good job there. Look, what I want to focus on today, Priya, is what you started the session around. You talked about two words, interconnectedness and fragility. And I want to speak a little bit about how we think about resilience in a fragile, interconnected world. What we've seen in the past 2-3 years with COVID-19 is how difficult it has been for individual countries or the entire world to respond to COVID-19 in a thoughtful, effective way. We have not been very resilient, and yet COVID-19 has been an incredibly fast-moving challenge. As we think about biodiversity loss, ecosystem degradation, or we think about climate, these are even slower moving risks, but arguably even more deadly. And since Professor started with a commission, and commissions have been mentioned, I want to actually share the results of a commission that I was actively involved in called the Global Commission on Adaptation. This was a commission that operated between 2018 and 2020. It was co-chaired by Ban Ki-moon, the former UN Secretary General, by Bill Gates, and Kristalina Georgieva, who is the current managing director of the IMF. India was one of a handful of countries that sponsored this commission. And the commission was focused specifically on how we think about building resilience to climate risk, how we elevate that in political kind of discourse, and how we develop an action agenda to build climate resilience all around the world. The imperative for this should be fairly clear to everyone. There's a strong human imperative to invest in resilience. We know that those that are least fortunate are oftentimes the ones that are most at risk, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's ecosystem degradation, whether it's climate change. We also know there is a very strong economic imperative to invest in resilience. If you look at cost-benefit analyses that have been done in a variety of different areas, ones we had done as part of the commission found that we had economic benefits at least 4 times greater than the investment in resilience. In no small part, because we know by investing early to avoid risk, oftentimes is much more economically smart than waiting to respond to a disaster that strikes. If you think about investing in early warning systems, if you think about investing in more efficient water management, if you think about investing in mangroves or more resilient infrastructure, you can imagine how those investments pay off easily. So there's a strong economic imperative to invest in resilience. Yet we don't, as a country, as a world, invest sufficiently in resilience. So what's the problem state? There are 4 challenges that we identify why countries, communities, companies don't invest sufficiently in resilience. The first is often the risk is not very visible. It's hard to understand precisely what the risk is and where to invest. Second, we have huge fragmentation in how governments or companies operate. If you think about governments, whether there's strong coordination from the local level, to the state level, to the national level, or between different sectors or ministries. This gets into the silos challenge and the need for systems thinking. That fragmentation makes it difficult for countries to respond to risk. Third, the finance system is very poor at understanding how to deal with non-financial risks. Climate risk, environmental risk, health risk, these are risks that the current financial system is not very strongly responding to. And fourth, we also know that these risks tend to fall on those with the least political power and voice. So how oftentimes we need to amplify their voice, the fact that oftentimes we fail to respond to those risks that fall upon those that have the least is a challenge with our political system. So what this commission did is it identified 3 revolutions we needed to see to really build resilience. We needed a revolution in understanding, a more precise understanding of what risk we're facing, of quantifying that risk, and of thinking about solutions to responding to that risk that can be shared around the world. So we needed to invest much more in risk identification and in sharing what works and what doesn't work around the world. The second, we needed a revolution in planning. We needed to improve how policy and investment decisions are made. We needed to integrate or mainstream risk into both public and private sector decision-making across the entire planning process, from upstream economic analysis to risk screening, to environmental and social impact assessments, to budgeting, to permitting, to project design and implementation, and need to integrate risk into our planning processes. And third, we needed to really integrate risk in finance. We needed a revolution in finance. We're beginning to see private banks, insurance companies begin to recognize some of these risks. That needs to be accelerated. We also need the public sector, public government expenditures to better understand these risks and invest in resilience. And as part of this, there's a very important role for the developed world to help support building resilience in the developing world. It is striking that we still have yet to meet the $100 billion climate finance commitment that was made in 2009 in Copenhagen. And yet we were found a way to mobilize $20 trillion in response to COVID-19. So the rich world was able to find $20 trillion to respond to COVID-19, but had not been able to find $100 billion to support developing countries in responding to the climate crisis. So revolutions in knowledge, in planning, and finance are critical to building resilience. The one other point I'd like to make, Priya, is that one of the challenges in building resilience is also to tackle underlying vulnerability in human health. And one of the biggest challenges that you and a number of people have mentioned is around air pollution. We all know that air pollution around the world, and especially in India, has major implications on human health, on agriculture in terms of crop yields, in terms of ecosystem health, harms water quality. There's a range of issues related to air pollution that continues to be a big challenge. One of the areas of work that NRDC has been doing in India is to help support cities develop clean air plans. And so I'm really delighted that today, as part of this conference, NRDC, in partnership with the Indian Institute of Public Health in Gandhinagar and the Center for Environment Education, are releasing a major report called Cleaning the Air, Priority Pollution Control and Monitoring Strategies based on efforts in Ahmedabad. What we've done, and I think there might be a slide here that shows this particular report release, is to try to identify where we see opportunities to tackle air pollution at the city level as a way to help the Clean Air for All mission that the Indian Environment Ministry has just launched at the end of 2020. So to conclude, as we think about interconnectedness, as we think about fragility, my main point is that the world, governments, countries, communities, cities have not done a sufficiently good enough job in building resilience to risk, to environmental risks, to climate risks in particular. We need a systems approach We need to start now. The economics are very powerful. Why investing in resilience makes sense. But to really do this, we need to see revolutions in understanding, in planning, and in finance to better identify, mitigate, and manage climate and environmental risks in how we operate. What this Commission report does is demonstrate how to do that in the key economic systems that we all recognize are critical for human well-being: agriculture, water, urban issues, the health sector, infrastructure, and so on. So with that, Priya, it's a delight to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manish, and thank you for highlighting the importance of resilience and how those that are most vulnerable are often those that are most at risk and worst affected. I think it integrates very strongly with the wider issues around systems connection and planetary health that we've been discussing. I would now like to invite Mr. Bartakur, founder and president of the Bali Para Foundation, to share his views.
Yeah, hi there. Hi, everybody. I just thought I want to bring a smile in everybody's face. You know, everybody's so serious. Of course, it's a serious matter, but maybe we should all smile and say that, you know, there was a technology conference recently which I attended, and they were all younger people than me for sure. I don't know about you guys. And the whole conference was fun. You know, and the whole conference was about actually conquest and looking at the future and looking at things so differently. So I just wonder whether the sustainability movements that we're doing with our leaders, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and all of us are actually trying to do fun, knowledge, and money. All three things matter to us. So I think we need to just bring in a little smile. I think everybody has said so many wonderful and good things and many recommendations which actually are already employed or will be deployed. I think there are basically, to say this, I started the preamble because as I was going through it, I was just trying to say that while I was very interested in many of the points, is this yet another conference which Apache had set up? And in his memory, I think he always had a smile and he did something fantastic for WSDC. And Priya, thank you for introducing everybody so happily and concluding it even happier. So I think we should just make this something which will be touchable, feelable, and a little more relevant to our real lives, because it's not all lost. It is tough. It's an uphill task, but that's the way most startups today are actually managing the world. So welcome to this conference. There's 7 billion people in the world, you know, and I was wondering, out of the 3.4 billion live in rural areas, then why is it that 97% of the world is located in urban areas? There is already a divide which is happening in trying to do this, and most of us are really townies. Most of us are living the wealth of urbanization that we've created post-industrial revolution. It's fantastic. 1.6 billion people directly depend on forests out of this and their livelihoods. But 5.4 billion people, if I remember, in the world indirectly depend on forests and rural areas for the essentials like food, building material, clean water, and technically also for the air that they breathe. There is a case not just for sustainable development. There is a case for biodiversity conservation. Not only for that, but also for equity and social justice. Unless you have the people, and unless you have indigenous people, and unless you have the people as what economics call at the bottom of the pyramid, included and involved in this entire change movement that we want post the industrial revolution, I doubt we'll be able to succeed. The opportunity is to bring back wealth to where it belongs, to the forest. The reason why I'm saying back is because long before agriculture, forests, including the great Amazon forest, were largely mixed crop farms, and human beings have helped enhance the biodiversity of the Amazon basic according to many reports. So let's re-examine what brought in modern economics. I think Adam Smith's legacy is really a very interesting starting point. There could be many starting points, including as recently as Bretton Woods and post-Second World War, where all the elements of Adam Smith actually went faster. I think Adam Smith celebrated treaties, the inquiry into the nature and causes and wealth of nations is widely acknowledged to be one of the foundational texts of modern capitalism today. It presents some of the most basic and accepted assumptions of our economy, the rational and the entire process of the rationality seems to be indicated in what we are doing. We also believe that the theory of economic growth through free market emerged at a time of privatization and enclosure of commons across Europe and emergence of private property as a key form of capital. In British colonies like India, the principle of enclosure of common lands for profit was instrumental in development of forest management system. And that still remains the backbone of the forest management. As well as the expansion of the plantation economy, which we call the colonization of actually nature through tea, coffee, rubber, cocoa. The creation of reserve forests and protected areas, which cordoned off indigenous communities from lands and resources they once freely had access to, is a direct legacy of the imperial need for timber and expansion of natural assets. This was the way the empire built railways. They also created fantastic infrastructure out of it. In fact, the plantation economies of former colonies led to over-exploitation of the ecosystems and ultimately depletion of the soil. We see this. I have been chairman of a tea company till recently. It's a big monoculture system. And this entire monoculture system, the soil, the water, the entire ecosystem in the value chain of nature has been affected. But this is 150 years later. I wish we were wiser then, but nevertheless, what is it that we go forward? I think the new liberal consensus that emerged in 1970 built on Adam Smith's classic principles of rational economic self-interest and free market, birthing the international commitment to liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Today, this has evolved into a race to the bottom in the name of profit, subsidies, ecological destruction, destructive sectors, including fossil fuels, the enclosure of public lands and commons to private entities for consumption-based deregulation of fueling and deregulation of pollution and globalization, weakening communities as a business, cut expenses by finding the cheapest labor and the cheapest natural resources in the world to fuel the continued growth of the largest stock markets of profitability. Rising consumption has fueled runaway growth, and it has fueled the destruction of our planet and its fragile balance of life. Is this all bad or is this all good? I'm not here to judge, but it's for us to understand a bit of history before we try and actually give solutions. But inclusion at the bottom of the pyramid is absolutely a key to this entire developmental agenda. However, the fundamental premises of Adam Smith's treaty were formulated solely on the basis of observation of a particular class of people within Euro-American society. And by 1920s, anthropologists around the world had discovered a different motivator for economy and cultures as diverse as indigenous community in North America to be Aboriginal people of the Pacific Islands. Reciprocity was the name. In this economic framework, economy is one element of a complex web of interdependent relationships. As many of the speakers have talked, that everything that you start and everything that you challenge leads to another and to another. In the economic framework, economy is one element of a complex system, as I have spoken about. David Graeber, I think his book on debt, the first 5,000 years, covers case studies showing how local economies have historically functioned absent of the barter principle and with people directly sharing with each other on the basis of formal system out there. A mounting body of evidence from behavioral economics and psychology, most of which we discussed earlier, shows that people don't purely behave in self-interest, but act altruistically or reciprocally expect, most often than others, the keystone of social cohesion. Evidence from archaeology, anthropology, and ecology demonstrates the historical role that people have played in creating forests we see today. Studies in the Amazon, for example, suggest that the Amazon began its life as a giant food forest maintained by the historical Mayan civilization and indigenous communities in the region. The prairie of North America was managed by Native American communities, just as controlled burns by Aboriginal communities. In Australia, as you would know, Professor, the bush created a unique ecology that supported great biodiversity. Collective land management historically has been linked, therefore, with greater biodiversity and ecological well-being. Research from around the world shows that the biggest predictor of biodiversity loss is socio-economic inequality. Even in countries with robust institutions for protecting biodiversity, high levels of inequality led to rampant biodiversity loss. I make this point, and I've given a big introduction primarily to link as to what the basic issue about deforestation has been. And the fringes of all the rainforests, poverty, inequality, social deprivation, is really a function of the fact that we have created this inequality from the top to the bottom. This control over natural assets, the commodification of their value, and only removed from the natural ecosystem and converted into sellable produce, the benefits of which are not given always to the people who are on the fringe benefit. We created a subject called naturenomics. Naturenomics is nothing but the interdependence between nature and economics. We've tried to create figures around it so that we can address issues around stock markets, Wall Street, our Sensex in India. And this has long made an argument that ecology and economy are the same. As a framework, naturenomics evaluates the impact of economic activity on the ecosystem, both positive and negative, and aims to eliminate negative elements by affirming positive nature-related impact. The most critical imperative for naturenomics is recognizing that ecology is economy. It means valuing our natural assets and natural capital pools that they hold rather than invisibly dividing their benefits and socializing the costs of their destruction. To achieve the following, naturenomics calls for us to do the following. Effectively value natural capital, which includes water. Ecological budgets. Every country must have an ecological budget before they go into the economic budget. So when we have our finance budget every year in India, I mean, it's an outdated system, nevertheless, we still use it, is that we actually do the finance budget with no reference to the ecological wealth that we have. None. And here we're talking about G20, here we're talking about COP26, we're talking about this. No country has an ecological budget. So unless you stand up there and talk about the ecological budget, then talk about the economic budget, we have actually missed the boat. Invest in nature regenerative economies. Any economy and any project plan which does not talk about when it destroys a bit of nature, how does it regenerate and recapitalize the entire process of what they call now circular economy. The invented pyramid of valuation in which natural capital is the last valued item in our balance sheet need to change. In the new paradigm, the future is with lush green forests, Bhutan, states like Arunachal and Assam, 85% forest. But in the GDP grid, last. Are they happy people? Yeah. But are they actually rich people? No, because there is no such value for nature. We need a new economic paradigm centering around nature capital and securing natural assets for sustainable community future. The valuation is a must to pave the way for social inclusion. This capturing of ecosystem goods and services to drive delivery of universal basic assets, such as healthcare, education, and indigenous rural communities will steward our natural asset. This happens quite a lot in many countries, certainly the Nordic countries, and certainly prime ministers who moved from ecology on, including Germany, Canada.
Mr. Barthakur, I'm going to ask you to just wrap up in the next minute or so, being mindful of time. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. So valuing nature and quantifying the benefits of the capital is absolutely critical. Valuing biodiversity, the Dasgupta review last year released in 2020 actually attributes an entire process, and it shows how, according to that, produced capital doubled in per capita, but human capital increased 17% and natural capital declined by 40%. So I think, and just to wrap up in the next 30 seconds, I think, like many economists today, the Dasgupta review points to the limitation of the GDP model. We need a new model, and with leaders like yourselves on the panel, I think we will be in a position to actually do this and take it forward. Thank you, Priya.
Thank you, Mr. Barthakur, for that call for a radical rethink of our socio-economic and environmental sort of development approaches. With that, I would like to invite Dr. Zhou Jinfeng, Secretary General of the China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation, to join us and share his views. Dr. Zhou.
Thank you. And today I'll share our vision of planetary resilience. Can you see my sharing? Today, I would like to emphasize on human-based solution. And we believe all the troubles are caused by human. And the only human-based solution is the only solution. And I would like to explain with a few stories. First one is mooncake. The overpackaged mooncakes annually cost about several multi-billions US dollar in China only. And do we need those packaging? And what about after we eat the cakes and the packaging? We do not have enough land to do landfill, or we do not have enough air to burn those, or to do anything recycling. Even to do the packaging with very green energy. Even if you do the with very low carbon material, it's not right. And we filed a litigation against the leading mooncake company. The court turned us down because they are following the standards. The industry standards are crazy. And all those terrible overpackaging are allowed by the industrialization, by our recent laws in the standards and the regulations. This is something we do not have that enough ecosystem to support us to waste such a great deal of the unnecessary goods. And finally, we pushed the authority change the standards. And another litigation, another case is the fast food disposable chopsticks. In China, every single day, the leading fast food delivery company will have over 10 million sales. One company only. That caused a huge area of forest That is we are enjoying the new lifestyle. We also filed litigation against all major 6 fast food delivery companies, and we have a very hard time. But eventually, we changed the regulation. All the fast food delivery companies cannot provide disposable chopsticks unless they are asked. This is a big change. In the biodiversity conservation, we have tried very hard to do many years, starting 1992. But the world failed to slow down the biodiversity loss. There are many reasons. One reason is the biodiversity conservation cannot forceful if we only do it in the state protected area. We need to do biodiversity conservation in our neighborhoods, during our farming, during our living, during the cities, urban areas construction. And that is the huge area we need to take care of biodiversity. That is also where there is a lot of things we can do, and but the industrialization pushed all the farmings, all the agricultures, all the business use chemicals, and with all those chemicals, we stop using the traditional fertilizer. We stop using the traditional native way of protecting the bugs, and the industrialization helps to promote their business, but at the same time, we destroyed all biodiversity. That is the very important reason we failed to slow down the biodiversity loss. Talking about carbon, we are born equal of carbon. No matter everybody, every citizen are equal with carbon right, the emission right, also are equal with the carbon responsibility. With some building, our building, we have even everybody left the building during the night. The building is still air conditioned on 23 degrees centigrade, no matter it's very hot summer or winter, which the developed country, the developed area, the people, even the energy, even the building are of very green energy, are of very low carbon material. It's not what we can afford. We must change, especially those very developed area like what we live in, and we need care about our responsibility of carbon emission. And the industrialization are pushing, are selling their service, their products, but we cannot afford it today. And this is another story about community conservation area. And this is a special bird called great bustard. In China, the state have a great bustard protected area in Inner Mongolia. It's very high standard state protected area. But during the winter, all birds are flying to the south, into the southern part because of the weather. Those birds do not know where is the state protected area anymore. They landed at the bank of Yellow River. Local people started trying to hunt them. They are the heaviest bird, and it's not difficult to hunt them even with today's technology. It's very simple. So we local authority does not care about it since it's not state protected area. And we, our volunteers, set up the community conservation area for Great Bastard at Changyuan, which works a lot. This is a new vision, a new approach. This is the way we engage all human, people, community, volunteers. That is the only way to change our today's situation. That is the only way to engage planetary resilience. And another story is in Nanyuan, Beijing. The local authority are trying to build a huge new wetland forest in the wetland park. They have money. They are doing ecological projects to build a forest in the wetland park. But after they build the park, how many birds do we have in the new forest in the wetland park? We have 4 to 5 kinds of birds. How many do we have before the park? We have 40 to 50 kinds of birds before the park. Why? The wilderness has different kind of grass. Different birds eat different kind of seeds. And the wetland has different bugs. So different birds eat different bugs. But after we build the forest wetland park, the grassland is very unique. It's one kind, one species. The trees are very simple. And they use chemicals to control bugs. So even they call this ecological project, but it is not. During our developing, we have building all highway, airport, parks, buildings. We have waste. We have destroyed the nature. That is what we cannot afford today. And this is another story in Shanghai coastal area. In Shanghai, they are going to planting trees in this coastal area because they want to absorb carbon, to do carbon neutrality. Yes, planting trees can do something for the good of carbon neutrality, but the coastal area is the only important intertidal wetland. They feed the migratory birds. They are the homeland for many sea life. Sea life is very important for biodiversity, also for climate, because the lives in water, in ocean, are a big alliance for our fighting climate, a big alliance to do carbon neutrality. But the industrialization make it simple. They want to do simple ways and to do standard ways, to do their ways. But this is not what we can afford today. Thank you for Dr. Pachuri, his visit, and I would like to end my talk and hope we can, with all speakers, we can continue to share our story, to learn the new way. We need to start to change our way of life. We need a new civilization, the industrial civilization. Even some people talking about green, some people talking about the carbon, but most of the time it's only a green code, a carbon code. It really playing industrialization, and the globalization is also a byproduct of industrialization. Yes, we need globalization, but today we also need localization for local food, for local service, for there are many ways we need to change. We need to welcome a new civilization to change our way of life, to change our way of production. That is only human-based solution, is the only solution to tackle our emergence today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joe, for highlighting the importance of true ecological projects and also community participation and activism. With that, I would like to thank all our stellar panelists for their thoughtful insights. We're over time, so I'm not going to attempt to summarize all that we've discussed. And I'd also like to thank the TERI team for the organization of the World Sustainable Development Summit and for their continued and strong partnership with us here at Bloomberg Philanthropies, where we're working strongly together on a technical assistance initiative in support of the Indian government's National Clean Air Program. Thank you all, and wish you the best for the conclusion of the summit, which has been very fruitful over the last few days. Thank you.